I think the bar to a great customer experience is really low. I think it
Really?
involves picking up the phone and calling people. I think it involves responding to emails, and I think it involves texting. It involves communicating, and it involves all of that, even when you don't have the answer, to
Sure.
say, "Hey, Mr. Customer, I know you're looking for this. I don't have this. I will touch base with you every 24 hours until I do, because I don't want you to think I forgot about you and you're not important to me." If a customer has to reach out to you 5 days after they ask for something and you haven't said anything to them, you failed.
Hello, and welcome to the Elevator Careers Podcast, sponsored by the Allred Group. I am your host, Matt Allred. In this podcast, we talk to the people whose lives and careers are dedicated to the vertical transportation industry to inform and share lessons learned, building upon the foundation of those who have gone before to inspire the next generation of elevator careers. Today our guest is Jeff Smith. Jeff started his career in new installation and modernization sales with ThyssenKrupp Elevator in Richmond, Virginia. Over the past 20 years, Jeff has held various sales and sales leadership roles and has also spent time in P&L. Jeff is currently the Regional Business Development Manager with Smartrise Engineering for much of the Northeast. Jeff is full of enthusiasm for the elevator industry and is passionate about the customer experience and helping develop the next generation of industry experts.
Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to get to talk to you. Obviously, we've been talking for years. I think it was 10 years ago that we first talked.
Absolutely.
Been a while. So it's a pleasure for me to be able to dig a little deeper into your career. And I'm just curious how you got started in the elevator industry.
Strictly by accident. I don't want to say I fell into it, because, that would make us think terrible things in this industry. But honestly, I had a buddy whose dad boated with a guy in the elevator business in Richmond, where I grew up. And he heard he needed somebody and thought I'd be a good fit.
So you were just finishing up college, or where were you in your
No, I was
journey?
working. I was working for Sprint in their consumer markets group.
Okay.
I already had been doing sales for years.
Okay. So somebody needs a salesman. It's like, hey, here you go. Let's hire Jeff and see what he can do.
Look, who knew you sold elevators?
Who knew that was a thing
Right.
at all? Right.
They came with the building.
Right. So when you got into the elevator industry, how long before initially did you even think, do I want to do this? Sprint at least is a known entity. I know what a phone is. I know how to sell that.
Sure. Yeah. Honestly, I was commuting 70 miles each way between the west end of Richmond and Charlottesville.
Okay.
And I think, being offered a car and a cell phone and a laptop and, personal use of a company car and good money and opportunity, good benefits, I think it was just something that felt like a good opportunity.
Sure. Why not at that point?
Exactly. Look, I was still young. I was mid-20s.
Okay. Yeah. So you get in, you start going. How long before it starts to click and you're like, dang, this is cool. I can keep doing this.
Definitely a couple months before you really felt like you knew anything, right? And some of that was dozing off at the desk, reading these giant manuals that got set down in front of me and hey, read this. Yeah, okay. So, you get 8 pages in and you might as well have been reading a book at night trying to go to bed, right? So, most of it just kind of happened organically through, hey, I went straight into new installation sales. And
Okay.
I had a couple days training with a rep out of Virginia Beach at the time. And he was great. We're still in communication now, 21 years later. But it was really kind of just feeling my way through it. Look, at the end of the day, new installation sales always seems to have this, I don't know, everybody's scared of it. If they didn't come up through it, nobody wants to touch it. They think it's mystical. Right. You're reading specs, you're looking at drawings, and you're kind of playing with fixed variables with most of the equipment.
Okay. So how long before you felt like you could really just have your confidence and enough to say, okay, hey, I can do this. I can go sell this.
Yeah, luckily coming up in Richmond, it wasn't a high-rise market. So,
Okay.
you come up with hydros, MRLs weren't really a thing back then in the early 2000s. Hydraulics and some traction cars. I would say I probably felt pretty good in 3 to 6 months, but
Yeah.
I would say it's kind of leaps and bounds. I don't know if you've ever played ping pong,
Oh,
but
sure.
you could be amazing at ping pong until you run into somebody that's at a different level and you can barely score a point, right? You can't return a serve. I feel like the elevator business goes like that. It's just big jumps where all of a sudden more and more stuff just starts to make sense. You
Right.
ask the right questions, you absorb it, you assimilate it into your knowledge base. And there's definitely been multiple leaps in my career. It was like, oh, now all this stuff makes sense. Now all this stuff makes sense.
Okay. So you just get like at some point, it's like, okay, I feel like I've got the whole Richmond market, and this is getting boring. Maybe time to move to something else. Is that how it went for you?
Yeah, actually, I was playing golf with, I guess, a district manager, maybe a regional VP at the time. I
Mhm.
think we were at a WM Jordan outing down in Williamsburg, Virginia. And he mentioned needing somebody in Philadelphia. And, me, I'm like, hey, that sounds cool. Hey, I'd go to Philly. And, a couple months later, I was in Philly.
Cool. Very good. Was that with the same company, or did you start with? I know you were with TK in Philly, right? So did you start with them as well in
Yeah, I
Raleigh?
mean, my entire time actually with an elevator contractor was with TK.
Okay. Okay. So it's only been the last what year, even at Smartrise, correct?
Yeah, last 10 or 11 months, correct.
Okay. So tell me about some of your mentors. I mean, it sounds like drinking out of a fire hose, learning fast, learning a lot, feeling like you don't know anything along the way. But then, who were some of the people that really kind of helped get you grounded?
Yeah, all along the way, branch managers, district managers, people that today I would call friends,
Hmm.
Don Wilson, my first branch manager, I learned a ton from him, just talking through stuff, looking at stuff together. Catherine Bashevsky, Bill Applebaum, Scott Dressel, people I worked directly with a lot, Brad Jaster, Pete Nelson, guys I had a lot of one-on-one time with. Mark Schroeder, honestly, to this day, still a mentor, still a friend. We still talk regularly.
That's cool. That's cool. That is one of the things I think is coolest about the elevator industry is how many people come and stay, make it a career, and so it really does become a community of people that you can continue to call on, continue to talk through, and then you see them at events throughout the year, or you know maybe
You
a few
go out
years
of your
later.
way to you go out of your way to bump into them when they're in town to grab lunch or dinner to catch up.
Yeah,
That's what you do.
yeah. Which in my experience doesn't happen in most other industries. I mean, that was my experience until about 12 years ago when I started recruiting in the industry, was that this is a different world. Elevators, I've never seen anything like it, in other words.
It's a tiny, big world, right?
Hmm.
We do really interesting things in a niche market. The industry as a whole is tiny compared to most industries, right?
Hmm.
But yeah, people that do it forever. And I don't know if it's a passion or if, I don't know, you just don't see your way out of it. And not that that's bad, because I don't think any of us feel trapped. It's just becomes part of you, I feel like. Like it's the symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, yeah. You come to love it. Um, how long do you feel like? I mean, you talked about kind of getting your feet under you, but how long before you really said, "Man, I love this. I don't think I ever want to leave."
I honestly think that happened really fast.
Okay,
You know, I can't see myself at another industry at this point. And I would say I've felt like that for most of my career.
very cool, very cool. Um, tell me what is it that you love the most? What is that thing, if you will?
I like being part of a team. I like working with people. I like learning. I like solving problems for people that they don't know they have,
Hmm.
right? I like asking questions people don't expect, right? One of the most impactful questions I've ever found is, you know, say you're at a descope meeting or a buy meeting and you're kind of done, and you look at the decision maker and you say, if we're not successful on this project, winning this project and getting this work with you, what will the winning company have done differently than we did? You know,
Very cool.
what will have differentiated the winner from the losers? I actually find most people find it to be a really thoughtful question. I haven't really ever gotten an answer from them though. You know,
Well, I was going to ask you if you use that question to win the bid. I mean, when you ask them that question, it's kind of like you're throwing it all out there. Here's your chance to let us know what we need to do to succeed.
yeah. Full disclosure, that one has not won me a job yet. It's just kind of fun.
Very cool. Very cool. So you talked about solving problems. What would you say are some of the biggest issues facing the elevator industry today?
I don't think people have good conversations. I think people just print specs.
Tell me
I
more
don't
about that. What does that
I
mean?
don't think people talk through what's important to you about this elevator, right? What do you need on this elevator? You know, or you print a spec off somebody's website, you know, or you hiring a consultant, but did we really think through what's important to you? If you don't have what will the impact be, right?
Mhm.
I don't know that most people even know what's available.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah. Why would you say they're not having those conversations? What is it that's not happening or is getting in the way of that?
It just seems like so many specs we see, regardless of where they come from, are rinse and repeat. It
Okay.
seems like they're photocopies.
Hmm.
You
I've
know,
heard
maybe
that
maybe
recently.
they've changed the elevator numbers, maybe they changed the capacity and speed, but everything else is kind of generalized and specific, but generalized.
What could you do better if or could be done better if those conversations were had? What would be the net effect difference?
I think people would get a better benefit out of their elevators. I think they wouldn't spend more money than they needed to, right? Look, there's a time when a pre-engineered elevator is perfect. And a
Hmm.
pre-engineered elevator is great in most markets, right? Pre-engineered elevators are rarely the way to go in New York.
Right. Okay.
If for no other reason than there's just not enough space, right? Everything is smaller in New York. But
Okay.
in most of the country, I don't know why you'd spec a custom elevator.
Interesting. So is that what you're seeing a lot of right now? Because I know you were in Philly before, so maybe
I mean,
uh,
it's all over the place, right? Almost everything in New York has a consultant.
okay.
And I think that's almost a requirement of financing at this point.
Wow. I didn't
So
realize it.
that's complicated.
Yeah. So it sounds like maybe just not enough, like you say, not enough questions being asked, not enough understanding perhaps of what the options are to get the right machine in place.
Yeah, I think it's all of it, right? And it's fixtures, it's features, it's functions, right? It's, hey, what's going to be important to you, right? Look, there's some people out there that spec some really smart stuff, you know, and when you talk about pre-engineered elevators, you're usually talking about a specific platform rating, right? Well,
Hmm.
service elevators, you probably don't want that platform rating. Even if it's a passenger car, it doesn't have to be a freight. You probably want a freight loading sill. You probably want a freight rated platform, right? Because at some point in time, you're going to have a big piece of equipment that's got to get up to the top of the building, that's got to get replaced. You probably want that on there. I think a lot of people don't really think through the height of cabs. I think a lot of people don't really think through the height and arrangement of doors.
Yeah.
I think I see some really complicated security specs that would be solved very simply with destination-based products, and they're not usually addressed that way.
Hmm.
Destination is just a touchscreen. It might as well be your iPhone.
True.
Everybody's got one.
So back to my question a minute ago, do you feel like that's one of the biggest issues facing the industry then is just not having a good conversation? Right.
Yeah, I think it's a miss, because I think a lot of people feel like they have to almost work against the people that they should be working with. I don't feel like there's a great partnership approach. And that's really the way I try to approach everything. You
Sure.
know, I mean, we've walked into meetings before and said, no, we didn't bid your spec. This is what we bid to you. What's important to you? What do you want to buy?
Right.
right? What are the key things we need
And
to
why,
do?
and why, right? Why do you,
Why? What are you trying to accomplish?
right?
And we typically won jobs like that.
Sure. Because you're thinking more deeply about what is it that you're accomplishing than the people paying the bill probably, maybe they just don't know. Maybe they don't know what's possible.
You don't know what you don't know.
Mhm. Very cool. What are some of the issues, other issues you see facing the industry?
Talent. It's not a sexy industry. You don't go set up at a career fair as an elevator company. Doesn't matter what banner you're carrying, and have kids flock to you, right? I mean, it's not Facebook, right? I mean, I did several of them over the years, and you could engage when you got the opportunity, but everybody was stopping at the big name companies, even UPS, right? Everybody wants to work
They
for the
recognize it.
big brown
Sure.
box. Correct. They see an elevator company and they have no idea what to think. Um, and don't get me wrong, there are definitely places where companies have done a really good job over a long period of time partnering with universities,
Sure.
and there's some great exchange there.
Sure.
It's not a recognized, desirable industry.
Right. No, unless somebody in your family, grandpa, dad, has told you, then there's in my experience zero recognition, right? I would have no way of knowing that. So you're right. I see that a lot. Obviously, I'm on the recruiting side of the business, but it seems like there's always a shortage of quality talent. Every company
Absolutely.
seems to have that issue, and I do think there are a lot of things being done to try to solve that, but at the same time, you've got generations retiring and taking 40-50 years of knowledge with them out the door, and so it's I think that's a big challenge for sure.
Well, and you've got so many independents growing and expanding, right? And they generally employ more people based on revenue and unit count than the OEMs do.
Okay.
And they're starting to pull up a bunch of that talent,
Sure.
that the OEMs used to have. So there's actually a need for more and more talent, but it's definitely, you're not getting the interest at the same level you have the need, for sure.
Right.
Current unemployment levels probably aren't helping that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't understand how people seem to vanish during COVID. It's like, how can everybody have problems with staffing? Just after 2 years, who knows?
There's no talent in the restaurant industry anymore either.
Oh, I know. Yeah, we had to wait for an hour just the other day at a restaurant, and I was looking around like half the tables are empty, and they're just like, it's a staffing issue. We don't have the people to go to the table.
Or like the police in New York, they're standing around staring at their cell phones. They're on the subway platforms, but they're staring at the subways, laughing at each other, or they're staring at their cell phones rather.
Understood. So let me ask you this: if you were to wave a magic wand, what's one thing you would improve in the elevator industry?
Wow, that's a big question. Probably the amount of time that the typical employee spends customer facing. I think a lot of companies get lost in measuring and talking about measuring and forecasting and looking at past results, and there's not enough time spent doing.
So you said typical employee, and maybe that's just an average thing. I was caught by that term typical because what I saw in my brain was you're talking about everybody being more customer focused, not just the salespeople, but the mechanics and the project managers and even the admin and the office staff and the engineers and the finance team get to know your customers is what I heard.
Yes, and you heard the right thing, right? And I think that's where the independents have really been successful over the years is, having been involved in some M&As over the years, and you bring these companies in and you start to get to understand the customers a little bit. And whether the M&A is successful or not doesn't really matter, but you start to realize that they didn't just know their mechanic. They
Sure.
didn't just know their sales rep. They knew the superintendent. They knew the ops manager. They knew the owner of the business.
Mhm.
And they knew the finance person by name, right? Yeah, they probably knew the project manager if they'd ever been involved, maybe a project engineer. Um, it's a different relationship, and everybody could do that, but not if you're married to your computer staring at things that you can't do anything about. But you can do something about a relationship, right?
Sure.
You can do
Yeah.
something about getting to know people.
Right. Right. When you, the reason I chuckled at just now was, I had a friend that used to work for a pretty big company, and he talked about the spreadsheets that, the more he was in ops leadership, but the bigger the company got, the more spreadsheets they wanted him to comb through and put in all the KPIs and all the numbers. Like, I want to be out with my people. I don't want to be staring at a spreadsheet all day.
Yeah, did you really hire a great field guy to stick him behind a desk? Or did you hire him to make sure your jobs made money? Because you can't make sure your jobs make money from behind a desk.
Right. Right. Yeah, that was always his thing. Um, so
Look, I
I've
like
got,
to have I'm sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you.
no, go
I,
ahead. Go ahead.
I always like to have my ops counterparts in closing meetings, in scope meetings, right? We used to like to bring project managers into those meetings. Let's show everybody the team, right?
Right.
Let's get everybody talking before it's even a job, because if you can get somebody comfortable with your team, you got a really high probability of winning.
Yeah.
We're not even talking dollars then. We're talking about, we want to work with these guys, right? They're making a decision to work with an organization long before they figure out what your value prop looks like.
Sure. Well, and you say with an organization, it's really, yeah, the individuals, right? Can I sit down with this person? Can we have a conversation? Do I like this guy or do I not?
Right,
Or
right.
or girl, right? This man or woman.
Does it seem like these humans bring value to what I'm trying to accomplish?
Sure.
Absolutely. I think it's huge. I've seen it work.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, so I've got a couple questions for you before we wrap up. And this one I didn't prep you for, but I was just curious, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you've seen that you think could have been prevented? What are some of the things that you've seen happen that you're like, gosh, that didn't need to be?
Procrastination, right? I think that's one of the biggest mistakes I made early in my career. Caused myself a ton of stress, right? Caused some project schedules to, probably go longer than they needed to on the front end. I'm not going to necessarily say that had an impact on the way the project turned out financially, but it definitely had an impact on the project, and it made me realize early in my career that you can't procrastinate. You need to take care of things.
What,
I think
specifically were you procrastinating? What was there a specific thing you're like, man, I don't like this?
doing a modernization survey, yes, that I was tasked to do by myself on basement geared machines, just honestly, the first big mod survey I'd ever done, probably around 2002, 2003, big custom job. Basically, you talk about not feeling comfortable, did not feel comfortable. Hey, here's a tape measure. Here's a bunch of surveys. Go pull these dimensions. Somebody want to come with me? No, it's all you. Okay. All right. So you know what? That didn't get done really fast. And ordering components probably got delayed a little bit, but I was young, mid-20s, and didn't want to do it.
Were you afraid of just getting it wrong, screwing it up? I mean, what was kind of
I was intimidated.
yeah.
I hadn't been walked through a complex survey like that with overhead shivs and all that stuff. If you looked at the survey sheets at the time, half of it seemed like almost the same exact information, but just slightly different enough that you might accidentally reverse it.
Yeah, I would be intimidated. I know that.
It definitely was. I think the biggest mistake everyone in this industry makes is not communicating well. I think the bar to a great customer experience is really low. I think it
Really?
involves picking up the phone and calling people. I think it involves responding to emails, and I think it involves texting. It involves communicating, and it involves all of that even when you don't have the answer, to
Sure.
say, hey, Mr. Customer, I know you're looking for this. I don't have this. I will touch base with you every 24 hours until I do, because I don't want you to think I forgot about you and you're not important to me. If a customer has to reach out to you 5 days after they ask for something and you haven't said anything to them, you failed.
Right. Right.
You've,
What do you
you've
think
already
drives
lost their
that?
trust.
Yeah. What do you think drives that issue?
I think people are scared to not have information, and just to not have the answer people are looking for. I think people are scared to just be honest and say, I don't have this, or I don't know this. I'm asking, give me 24 to 48 hours and I'll get back to you. And then actually make a task that's going to trigger you to get back to the person and actually follow your task list.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I heard you saying was just doing that makes it a great customer experience, because the customer knows you care. They know they can get a hold of you. They know that you actually did what you said, which is get back to them with an answer. And maybe the answer wasn't what they wanted to hear, but just knowing that, oh, hey, there's a person who can walk me through this and get me in the right direction.
Yeah, the customer knows they're not forgotten, right? And even
Right.
if it's bad news, at least you're giving them news. At least you're giving them the ability to make other decisions. Because without your information, they're frozen. They're stuck.
Yeah.
They're waiting. Good news, bad news, medium news. One way or the other, they're gonna pick a course once they have news. But no news, they're paralyzed, right?
Yeah. It sounds like you see that a lot, right? Because you said everybody makes this mistake. It's this far from this much, I guess, to have a great customer experience, but we're not doing that as much as we should.
People don't do it. No, I don't think people communicate well. And I think those that do are very successful. Very successful. And again, it just seems so simple. And maybe not enough people are told that.
Yeah.
Maybe we're not training people to do that well enough. But again, if the difference between success and failure is calling somebody back, I didn't ask you to do something very complicated, did I? I asked you to pick up a phone.
Now that is funny you say that. I'm chuckling because I got teenagers, and when I say, hey, call so and so, they're like, what? Right? I know how to text, Dad, but this whole conversation thing, that's like antiquated. That's something you do and Mom does, but we don't do that stuff unless it's with my friends. If it's well, even their friends, it's like they text, but they don't know how to talk.
My 15 and 17-year-old are the same way. Yeah,
Mhm.
I agree completely. And there's so much more value in a conversation, right? There's less misinterpretation in a conversation.
Oh, absolutely.
One of the other things I find that frustrates me is I feel like people don't actually answer the questions they're asked.
Sure.
I feel like I can write an email with some very specific questions, maybe one, maybe three, maybe
Mhm.
12. At best, I'll get part of an answer to one of them back most of the time.
Right.
I'm definitely not getting a direct response, and that vexes me.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. I mean, and I see it a lot, even in my work. So if I send 2 questions, I sometimes get the answer to one. If I, but never 2. If it's
Right.
more than 2, kiss it goodbye.
Yeah. I don't know if it's an attention span problem or what, but it's crazy.
Yeah.
Again, that seems like a low bar.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds like a very simple tool to, as you said it, to great success. I mean, if you're willing to call your customers back, they are going to reward you in ways that the other person won't get because they didn't call back.
Well, and it's the difference between bidding jobs and hoping you win them and somebody placing orders with you.
Right.
I'd rather have customers that place orders with me because they trust me.
Yeah.
A whole lot easier.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Jeff, this is fascinating. I'm enjoying it. But I also promised to keep a time limit. And so I want to ask you, the final question is what, and maybe we've touched on it already, but what advice would you give to, let's say, the next generation of elevator professionals? maybe they're new people coming in, or maybe just the industry as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I think we touched on some of it, right? Communicate, right? Call people back, return texts, send information, answer questions, right? But I think the big thing for the next generation is realize you don't have all the answers. I don't have all the answers. I learn stuff every day. I
Right.
ask so many questions. I annoy people. What I try to do is make sure I retain whatever knowledge and wisdom people give me. But the next generation should ask questions. They should be eager to learn. You know, so many people follow Ed Rivera, right? On
Sure.
LinkedIn, right? Ed's little nuggets of wisdom are point on. His feed is amazing, and he's so right. Asking those questions, reading the books, educating yourself, you're only making yourself better.
Yeah.
You're making yourself more marketable. You're making yourself easier to employ. You're making yourself more valuable.
Yep.
You have to be interested. You have to develop yourself. You really do. It's true.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And I've had similar conversations with Ed. I think that part of his point is you got to believe in yourself enough to just put yourself in it. You can't wait for somebody to bring you all the answers. Go get the answers. And when you do, you will be extremely valuable.
Absolutely. And then to Ed's point, share them.
Exactly. Yeah. Agreed. Jeff, thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun.
Absolutely, man.
Appreciate
Hey,
your
look,
time.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll talk again soon.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you for listening to the Elevator Careers podcast, sponsored by the Allred Group, a leader in elevator industry recruiting. You can check us out online at elevatorcareers.net. Please subscribe, and until next time, stay safe.